Have you ever left a conversation feeling defeated, despite having expressed everything you thought? Have you ever felt that knot in your throat, as if every word spoken had distanced you from your true inner essence? You're probably surrounded by individuals who raise their voices, interrupt you, mock you, and control situations with arrogance disguised as confidence. And perhaps, unconsciously, you've always thought that staying quiet meant being weak, that not opposing meant giving in, that the absence of reaction was synonymous with defeat. But what if I revealed to you that this is only an illusion, that true dominance doesn't manifest through words, but in their complete absence? But before we continue, like the video, share it with people who could benefit from it, and write in the comments which city you follow our YouTube channel from. Your support helps us grow and reach more people. Nietzsche, one of the most misunderstood minds in the history of thought, intuited something that few dare to recognize. Those who exceed in speaking end up revealing too much about themselves. Those who feel the urge to persuade have already lost control from the start. Society educates us to believe that we must fight, argue, protect our convictions as if every dialogue were a clash to establish absolute truth. But existence suggests an alternative path, more refined, a more deadly and immensely more intelligent path than the one we commonly follow. Nietzsche understood that silence doesn't merely represent the absence of sounds, but constitutes a presence that overwhelms everything else around it. Silence generates uneasiness in others. It destabilizes them profoundly. It forces them to come to terms with their own interiority, without being able to count on external distractions that protect them from this intimate and often uncomfortable confrontation. This content is dedicated to you who feel continuously overlooked, sidelined, diminished in your opinions and ideas. To you who leave conversations with the bitter sensation that no one truly understood your message. To you who are exhausted from always representing the easiest target, the accommodating person, the one who strives to maintain harmony while others shamelessly exploit your peaceful nature and availability. Perhaps you've mistaken your silence for submission, for a form of unconditional surrender. But at this moment I will demonstrate that silence can transform into your most formidable and devastating weapon against those who underestimate you. And that authentic victory doesn't arise from prevailing in a discussion, but from never feeling the need to enter one. Prepare to see silence under a completely new and revolutionary light for your life. Not as an absence of response, but as the most definitive and powerful response you could ever give. Let's explore Nietzsche's insights together and discover how to dominate any situation without uttering a single word. Why do we feel such a pressing need to reply, to counter-argue, to correct, to prove our reason? Because in our depths we've been programmed to believe that truth must be defended without any compromise. That by remaining silent we allow adversaries to triumph over us. But Nietzsche identified this as a symptom of our most hidden fragility, the terror of appearing vulnerable in front of others. Behind this fear lies the ego, a fragile ego that doesn't tolerate being questioned, that interprets every dissent as a personal attack, transforming any conversation into an emotional and psychological battlefield. Nietzsche affirmed that the majority of people don't seek truth when they argue. They seek control, they seek to consolidate their beliefs not because they're founded, but because if they're questioned everything collapses. Argumentation, in this sense, isn't a tool of wisdom. It's defensive armor, a desperate cry from the ego to maintain control over the narrative and the perception that others have of us. And what does this mean for you? That when you feel the compelling need to justify yourself, to prove your reasons, you've already entered their game and lost, because the simple necessity of justifying reveals your inner weakness. This need demonstrates that you're still trapped in the desire to be accepted, validated, understood by others. Nietzsche defined this phenomenon the herd morality, the behavior of those who live according to others' expectations, the behavior of those who desire to be perceived as good, correct, just according to external parameters. But this obsessive search for approval is exactly what maintains you in a position of inferiority. True strength, according to Nietzsche, doesn't reside in convincing others of your reasons, but in having no need to do so. It lies in sustaining your vision even when they laugh in your face, criticize, or reject you. It lies in being misunderstood and remaining steady in your convictions nonetheless. What Nietzsche proposes to us is a type of power that isn't measured in verbal victories but in inner control and self-mastery. A power that arises from the ability to remain calm while everyone around you is losing control of their emotions. A power that grows the moment you stop reacting to external stimuli. If you truly want to win, you must understand this fundamental principle. The game of discussion is theater, and the first to stand up to act has already lost the match before even starting to speak or argue. Nietzsche knew that the reactive mind is a subjugated mind, controlled by external events. The mind that observes, that's truly dangerous because it stands above the necessity of proving anything. But then, if we shouldn't react, how can we exercise our power over others? If words betray us, how do we make others feel our strength without uttering a single phrase or word? Nietzsche had a precise answer to this crucial question. And the answer lies in the ideal of the Übermensch, the being who transcends the limitations of common morality and dominates the world through absolute self-control. In the next segment, we'll explore this extraordinary figure and understand how it embodies the strategic use of silence as a weapon of psychological domination. Are you ready for this level of superior understanding? Because from this point forward, silence begins to speak with a powerful and unmistakable voice. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel to support us. Nietzsche didn't write for the weak of spirit. He wrote for that minority who possessed the courage to look within themselves, confront their own existential misery, and transform it into an unstoppable and devastating force. For him, the ordinary human being lives imprisoned by social conventions, moralisms, and the constant necessity of others' approval. But there exists another category of human being, rare, dangerous, completely free. The Übermensch or Overman doesn't live by reacting passively to the world surrounding him. He shapes the world according to his image and his will. And the most extraordinary part, he often does this in complete and absolute silence. The Übermensch doesn't feel the need to win sterile debates. He doesn't engage in low-level emotional games. He observes attentively. He understands profoundly. He carefully chooses when to speak and when to remain silent. More importantly, he chooses when to remain silent because he has understood something that others completely ignore. Silence is a form of language, a language that doesn't seek to convince but imposes presence. The Übermensch's silence isn't empty or devoid of meaning. It's a silent threat. It's pure authority. It's the sound of perfect self-control. While others shout and agitate, he commands respect with his gaze. While others explain and justify, he observes and reveals others' weaknesses simply through his imperturbable calm. His silence is like an impenetrable wall that generates anxiety in others. Those who find themselves on the other side despair, vainly attempting to guess what hides behind that apparent impassiveness. And in that desperation, they commit fatal errors and reveal too much about themselves. They lose emotional and psychological balance. This silence isn't passivity or indifference. It's absolute control of one's vital energy. It's strategic economy of one's mental and emotional resources. The Übermensch knows that every word uttered is a move revealed to the enemy. Every emotional reaction is the exposure of a weak point that can be exploited against him. That's why he remains silent, not because he has nothing to say, but because he doesn't need to say anything. He has transcended the necessity of proving something to someone. His presence already speaks eloquently for him. And more than this, his presence deeply disturbs because his silence forces others to look within themselves, to confront their own inner noise and mental confusion. In a society dominated by constant noise, those who master silence automatically become sovereigns. Nietzsche saw the Übermensch as one who creates his own values, his own rules, his own morality. He doesn't depend on anyone's validation. And it's precisely for this reason that he's feared. Because nothing destabilizes more than an individual who can't be manipulated through guilt, fears, or the need for acceptance. His silence is the shield against all these mechanisms of social control. And when he speaks, he does so because his words have the power to topple an entire empire with their truth. But this raises an essential question that we must address. What makes silence so unsettling for others? Why do so many people feel threatened when someone simply chooses not to react? What happens in the human mind when the expected confrontation is replaced by an overwhelming and incomprehensible absence? The answer lies in psychology, and that's exactly what we'll explore in the next segment. Because to understand the power of silence, we must first understand the chaos it generates in others' minds. And believe me, it's much deeper and more complex than it might seem on the surface. Silence isn't simply the absence of sound or words. It's an implacable mirror. And what it reflects for many people results completely unbearable to look at and accept. When you choose not to react, you're not only silencing yourself. You're forcing the other person to listen to their own voice, to confront their own arguments without the comfort of external resistance. And this process destabilizes them profoundly because the majority of people don't speak to express themselves authentically. They speak to protect themselves, to convince themselves, to hide the inner void. The void that exists between what they say and who they really are. And when you remain silent, their mask falls inexorably. Their disguise dissolves and their true nature emerges. Social psychology has already scientifically demonstrated that in confrontational situations, silence is perceived as severe judgment. It doesn't matter if you're simply listening attentively. The speaker immediately begins to feel exposed, vulnerable, insecure. Why does this happen? Because without your response, without your reaction, they lose complete control of the narrative. The human brain enters a state of maximum alert. The amygdala, the region of fear and anxiety, immediately activates. The other person begins to project their deepest fears onto you. Is he judging me? Has he noticed my insecurity? Does he know I'm bluffing? And in this psychological battlefield, silence acts like an invisible blade that cuts without being seen. It cuts where no one can see physically, but everyone can feel emotionally. Nietzsche intuited this phenomenon long before modern psychology confirmed it through scientific studies. For him, the average person lives as a slave to their emotional reactions. They act on impulse, react out of vanity, speak for fear of being forgotten or ignored by other members of the social group. The superior spirit, the one who completely masters himself, remains silent because he knows that every word given is a piece handed to the enemy. Every emotional reaction is an involuntary scream that reveals where to attack. Moreover, silence has a devastating effect on expert manipulators. People who thrive on the emotional control of others depend on your reactions to remain in the power game. When you don't react, you break the vicious cycle and the manipulator goes into total panic. He needs your response to validate his own position of superiority. Without it, he loses himself completely. He reveals himself for what he really is. He shows the weakness he's tried so desperately to hide behind his facade of security and control. His true nature emerges without filters. But there's something even deeper that we must consider. Silence also activates unresolved pains from the past. It activates traumas of rejection, abandonment, humiliation that often date back to childhood. Because suddenly the other person realizes they're not at the center of attention, that their words aren't sufficient, that their presence isn't making any significant impact. And this results intolerable for the narcissistic ego that inhabits each of us. That's why when you remain silent, you're not simply defending yourself passively. You're attacking where it hurts most, at the center of the illusion that others have built about themselves. This is why silence requires extraordinary inner strength. It's uncomfortable not only for others but also for you. Because it goes against everything you've been taught, against the natural impulse to react, to justify yourself, to explain yourself to others. But it's precisely for this reason that it's so powerful. Because it requires mastery, and mastery is the true power that distinguishes the strong from the weak. Now that you understand how silence operates in the other's mind, how it activates insecurities and dismantles defenses, how it unmasks artificial postures, the time has come to go beyond, to stop being just an observer and become someone who uses this force intentionally, strategically, with full awareness. In the next segment, you'll discover exactly how to transform silence into a conscious and calibrated weapon. How to win any discussion without saying a single word. How to dominate through absence. And when you learn to do this correctly, no one will be able to control or manipulate you anymore. The time has come to stop simply understanding the power of silence. It's time to start using it actively, because knowledge without practice is just dead and useless theory. From this moment, you'll learn to transform your silence into a surgical precision weapon. No longer as a defensive shield, but as a sharp blade, ready to cut others' masks at the exact moment they least expect it. And the first step is simple but brutal. Be silent when your will screams for an immediate response. This requires superhuman strength because everything in you will want to react instinctively. It will want to justify itself in front of others to feel accepted. It will want to prove it's right at all costs. But that desire is pure poison for your soul. Every time you give in to that temptation, you reveal that you're still under others' control. You reveal that you still care about what they think, that you're still playing their game according to their rules. True silence is born only when you completely kill that need. When you deeply understand that you owe nothing to anyone, that truth doesn't need to be spoken to exist in reality. The second weapon of silence is attentive observation. While others talk, get lost in complicated explanations, and try to fill the void with useless words, you listen attentively. But you don't listen like someone waiting for their turn. You listen like a hunter listens to prey's footsteps in the forest. You perceive the hidden fears between the lines, the subtle contradictions, the insecurities disguised as arrogance and superiority. And you store all this in your mind because when you speak, if you speak, it will be surgical. It will be with the precision of someone who completely masters the other's emotional territory. The third weapon is time control. Learn to let silence last longer than normal. The pause is an element of growing tension, and tension is pure power. While the other person speaks, waiting for your reaction that never comes, they experience progressive internal collapse. The discomfort grows exponentially. Their mind begins to fill the void with assumptions, with fears, paranoia, projections. A simple look from you accompanied by silence can have more impact than 10 perfectly formulated and argued sentences. The fourth weapon is total unpredictability. When you master silence, you become completely unpredictable to others. And the unpredictable is always feared because people don't know what to expect. And when they don't know what to expect, they lose their psychological advantage. They become cautious, wary. They start measuring every word. You invert the logic of social interaction. From reactive, you become the gravitational center. At this point, silence is no longer absence of communication. It's pure domination, absolute control of the situation. But be careful not to confuse silence with submissive passivity. Nietzsche was never a supporter of weakness in any form. The silence we're talking about here is active, tense, charged with precise intention. You're not holding back out of fear or shyness. You're preparing, choosing, positioning yourself strategically with a type of strength that doesn't need to be shown to be clearly perceived by others. It's a presence that is felt. And when the right moment arrives, the moment when silence has already said everything it needed to say, you can utter a single sentence, a precise comment, something that definitively closes the discussion. Not because it was stronger in terms of volume, but because it was truer, deeper, more undeniable in its essence. But this brings us to an even more delicate and complex issue. Because up to this point, we've discussed how to use silence to win. But there are moments when the game isn't just about winning. It's about surviving emotionally. There are situations where people aren't simply debating with you. They're using you, manipulating you, draining you, and you, without realizing it, are giving away your power every day. You're being dominated without a single word needing to be spoken. And here we arrive at the darkest point of this journey of awareness, when silence is no longer strategy, but a silent scream from someone who has lost control of their own life. In the next segment, we'll expose this uncomfortable truth. We'll show you how you might be being used without realizing it. Because while you think you're avoiding conflicts, someone might be building an empire on your silence. And Nietzsche already knew all this long before us. Is there something more perverse than being silenced? It's being conditioned to think that silence is your only possible option. That swallowing anger, giving in during discussions, avoiding conflict at all costs is synonymous with maturity and wisdom. That remaining silent is a sign of inner balance and peace with oneself. But what if I revealed to you that this could be a psychological trap? That many times this type of silence isn't wisdom but submission disguised as virtue? Nietzsche saw this phenomenon with brutal clarity. What you call inner peace is often just your domestic and domesticated surrender. Have you ever noticed how some people take advantage of your calmness? Of your ability to listen, to overlook, to avoid direct confrontation? They push their ideas, impose their wills, occupy spaces that were yours, and you let them do it. You convince yourself that it's not worth fighting, that it's better to maintain harmony, that it's not that important. But the truth is one. You're paying an extremely high price for this false peace. And the worst part is that you're being used by those who have understood that you will never react. Nietzsche spoke of the morality of slaves, that value system constructed by the weak. To survive in a world dominated by the strong. It's the morality of resignation, of guilt, of being kind at all costs. An invisible code that teaches you to nullify yourself, to diminish yourself, to conform, and to still feel virtuous for having done it. But Nietzsche didn't write for those who passively resign themselves. He wrote for those who dare to break these chains, for those who realize they're being used and decide to stop participating in their own voluntary submission. When you accept this type of silence, the one that swallows you from within, you're giving away your power without realizing it. You're being shaped by others' expectations. You're no longer yourself. You are what others need you to be. And this is the opposite of what Nietzsche called the will to power. Because the true will to power isn't shouting against others. It's not dominating others through force. It's completely dominating oneself. It's regaining control of your own personal narrative. It's being silent not because you're afraid, but because you owe nothing to anyone. This silence of submission must die within you, and in its place must be born the silence of authentic presence. The one that doesn't bend, that doesn't humiliate itself, that doesn't apologize for existing and for occupying its own space in the world. The one that stands up in the midst of chaos and without saying a word changes the course of the situation. This is the silence that Nietzsche would respect. The silence of the individual who has become master of himself. But how to reach this superior level of awareness? How to move from being manipulated to being the master of your own presence? How to kill the herd morality within you and be reborn as someone who imposes authority even when silent? The answer lies in the most powerful figure of Nietzsche's philosophy, the Übermensch. We've already talked about him previously. Now it's time to understand how to actually become one. In the next and final chapter, you'll discover what it takes to embody this new type of human being. Because the world doesn't need others who speak without sense. It needs those who master silence and reign through it. We have reached the final point of this journey, and now I need you to understand one thing, with all possible clarity. Silence isn't absence of communication. It's not existential emptiness. It's not a space between sentences. True silence is pure and uncontaminated presence. It's absolute mastery. It's the sign that you're no longer reacting to the world passively. You're shaping it with your simple existence. Nietzsche never wrote for those who settle for surviving. He wrote for those who want to transcend their limits, for those who are willing to tear off the masks that society has imposed, even if this process hurts. The Übermensch's silence isn't the silence of the oppressed nor that of the coward who hides. It's the silence of the warrior who has already won before the battle even begins. It's the quietude of one who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone because he knows exactly who he is and, most importantly, knows what he deserves from life. Now look at your life with brutal honesty. How many times have you remained silent out of fear, out of guilt, for not wanting to disturb the apparent peace? How many times have you let others decide for you, speak for you, trample your personal truth? Enough with all this. The time has come to say enough. Nietzsche would say that living this way is an offense to existence itself. That accepting this type of silence means betraying oneself in the most profound and painful way possible. From today forward, your silence must completely change tone. It must stop being an escape from reality and become an invisible scream of authority, an insurmountable boundary, a powerful affirmation of who you are, even if no one around you manages to understand your true essence. because who you are doesn't need to be understood by others. It needs to be lived fully and authentically, and this requires extraordinary courage that few possess. Do you have this courage within you? Then write in the comments, "I choose the silence that commands respect." Not only so I know you've made it to this point of the video, but so you can publicly affirm this choice, this commitment to yourself, because words have extraordinary power, even when they speak about silence. And don't stop here with your personal growth. The next video is absolutely essential for your journey. It will expand what you've learned here and take your mind even further toward new horizons of awareness. Watch it not for me, but because you deserve to go beyond your current limits. And always remember this fundamental truth. The weak shout desperately to make themselves heard. The strong remain silent with dignity. The wise choose with precision when it's the right time to speak and when it's better to remain silent. Silence is your most powerful weapon.